afternoon. Welcome to the show, Judy. It's so great to have you.
Thank you. I'm excited to talk to you.
Thanks. Yeah, I've really enjoyed your Instagram and what you do for the community, and really the message of We Belong. And so I want to ask, could you tell us a little bit more about We Belong? What is it? How did it get started?
Yeah, so I started out as a women's portrait photographer. I had my own studio for a while, about 5 years, and I did a lot of transformative portrait work, which is really work where we use photographs for self-reflection and personal growth. And as like the pandemic happened and, George Floyd and Asian hate and all the things that happened, and also some, we had like a mental health crisis in my own family, it really started shifting me like outside of like individual level work, and I wanted to do something, make a bigger impact with my photography. So I kind of was figuring out like I don't want to call it like what I do based on my name. I want to have a name that encompasses all of us, because I've really been interested in and working towards like really building a collectivist mindset and thinking about us as a community, like an actual community that takes care of each other and is there for each other, and making a big social impact, right? Like what can we do to make the world a better place in our own little way?
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. One of the things that I like about your Instagram is this recent post that you shared, and I want to read it off because I think it really ties into the show today. There's a whisper we keep hearing. It's saying that we must build in us what we want to see built in the world. When we act from this truth on a global scale, using the lens of the body, we usher in the transformative opportunity of radical self-love, which is the opportunity for a more just, equitable, and compassionate world for us all. And this is by Sonia Renee Taylor.
Yeah. So have you read The Body's Not an Apology? That's what this quote is from.
You know what? I have heard of it. I have not
Yeah.
read it, and I really do need to like read that.
I think it should be required reading for everybody who cares about inequality and oppression and want to see a better place, a better world. And Sonia Renee Taylor really talks about inequality through the lens of the body. So it's not necessarily like the person you are or who you are, where you're from. It's like, what is the body that you live in? And what does that body identity, where does that place you on the hierarchy? So she says there's like a hierarchy of bodies. And she really looks at this idea of like radical self-love and learning to like love ourselves like radically, not just like
Yeah.
body positivity, not just body acceptance, but like radical self-love. And this practice of doing that for yourself, which of course will be reflected in the way you treat other people. And so this book has been like such, it had like a really big impact on me. I just love the way she talked about bodies. And she's this big black woman, she's got alopecia, so she's bald, and she's like naked on her cover with like flowers out over her bits. And it like, even just the cover really pushes you to think about like how we judge and value people based on the bodies they live in. It's I quote it because I am currently beginning an art project called Embodied Rebirth, which is all about exploring the journey of the body and what, the beginnings of like what it feels like to have pain and trauma and harm caused to you because of the body you lived in, like all the way to like, how do we figure out collectively to heal like from this, right, as a society. And it's like maybe in your own little circle and bigger and bigger and bigger, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's like like a 2-year art project with the show coming in 2027.
Nice. Okay. And so if you looking at your page, there's a couple of other art projects that really stand out to me, because you've done the work with the body, but I also noticed that you have some portraiture of different women and their names. I want to ask you a little bit more about that as well.
Yeah, so I had a big show last year. This was kind of like the first project I started. Well, not the first, maybe the second project that I started kind of just for myself. And I was given my name when I started elementary school in America. So I immigrated when I was 6. And, since I got here, I started first grade. And when I was registering, my parents gave the registrar my Korean name, and they decided that it wasn't good enough and assigned me like a go-to name that I would be called in class. And I've been like, I don't like my name. I've always been like torn about what to do with it. And so I started asking other Asian American women about their names. And of course, like we all have these incredible stories of our names. And like, then it's just the lens, like the name's just a jumping off point to explore what it means to like be American. Like what price do we pay for belonging in America? And how does our relationship with our names and where we got our names and how we got our names really lends itself to explaining like that experience. So I did this big portraiture project with tons of people and telling the stories of our names just to kind of make people question the idea of like, especially like as an Asian American, we're always seen as perpetual foreigners. Like, we get like the, where are you from? Well, I'm from California. Well, where are you really from? Right? Like
Yes.
that typical question that we get asked. And of course, the people who ask it don't mean harm, but it causes incredible harm because we're always treated as perpetual foreigners. So it's really a challenge for people to rethink like, what does it mean to be an American and what does an American look like? And even though it was a project I did last year, I feel like right now, today, it's even more relevant because of what's happening right now in politics and
Yeah.
how, like the term like American, how it's being applied. It's obviously like only for white folks, right? Or
Yeah.
white
Yeah.
heterosexual normative folks, and everybody else doesn't get to belong. And so it's really questioning that idea, but challenging people in a way that feels like empathetic by telling like vulnerable stories and connecting, right? Connection makes such a big difference in the way that people think and feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Like even going to the names, going to like where you're actually from, it's something that even myself, like my ethnic identity, there's a lot of different races in it, but I am for the most part black, but it's black as in we've been here since slavery, and so I've had instances where I'll have people who, they're from Africa and they'll ask me, "Oh, where are you from?" And
Mm-hmm.
I'll say, "Well, Bakersfield, my hometown," because we don't have anything beyond that. And then it's happened quite a bit. And then in the current political climate, when it's like, hey, you don't belong here, and that message is being sent for everyone, including Black Americans now, with
Yeah.
then it's like, well, where do I really belong? Like I have no backups. There's no
Yeah.
other option.
Yeah, and that's how I came up with the "We Belong." First, it wasn't taken, right? So that helps, right, for a website
Yeah,
and the practical aspect. But like this idea, like we actually belong, like it's just something that I am constantly navigating and constantly thinking about, and like thinking about the spaces that I spend intentionally, like that I give my time to, and
yeah,
how we create belonging. Because belonging, yes, you can do the inner work. I've done the inner work. I belong to myself, right? Like no one can take that away from me. But at the same time, a lot of like the personal growth space that I've kind of encountered that's very like westernized and like based on like Western ideals of hyper individualism are like really harmful, because it's like, yeah, I belong to myself, but what am I going to do with that? Right. If I'm not using that in service of creating belonging for, all the lives that I touch around me, then what's the point of having that feeling of belonging? So, and I think that really points to the work that you do too. I mean, you created your gallery literally to say, hey, you don't feel like you belong in other spaces, you belong here. And I think that that's really important.
and that's the that's the funny part about it too, because I didn't feel like I belonged until I opened the gallery, and then I was like, oh, I've belonged all along. I didn't like, don't get me wrong, I'm glad I did it, but I didn't have to do this to feel like I belonged already. And there's some artists I'm talking to that I'm letting them know. I'm like, hey, you belong here, by the way. Like, I did all this. One in particular, he said that he wants to open his own art business, but he's not a part of the art community. I was like, well, hold on. You belong here. You're a part of it. Just understand, like, even right now, you're a part of it. You've been here. You've helped me with the gallery. You're a part. You don't need to do all of this to become a part of it. But I think
And
even my, oh,
yeah, no, and I just wanted to add to that, like that person needed to hear that message though. And sometimes it's all it takes is someone to tell you that, right?
yeah,
It's not some like grand, like you don't have to open an art gallery. I mean, obviously this is what you did, right?
yeah,
But like just the
easier
simple
ways.
act of telling someone that they belong, and just like not even just saying that, but like treating someone like they belong, like
Yeah,
welcoming them into your space, making them feel welcome, making them feel like, oh, I'm so happy you're here. Like it doesn't really take that much effort, honestly, to
yeah.
create that belonging.
And so one thing that between the time that we've talked earlier this week and now, I came across, it was a podcast that said that it's very important that let's say the global majority, because people of color here, it kind of diminishes that we are the global majority. Oftentimes we need to hear not only that we belong, but that we deserve to live, we deserve to be here, and we deserve to like have a future and a dream. So seeing We Belong Seattle and everything that it's done, specifically, you make posts about not just art exhibitions and open calls, but also grants. I know seeing that it's helped me understand that I belong or I deserve to be able to go for the same grants as I see everyone else, and that I'm not excluded. Which I think is I don't know where that message came from. that I was excluded. But seeing you say that really reinforced that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like there's somebody like sitting in a dark room, like smoking a cigar, saying like, "Oh, I gotta make sure Kyle feels like he doesn't deserve grants," right? But the messaging comes in like so many different subtle ways, like not seeing grant winners who look like you, who have your art background. And also art, like the art world is like inherently elitist, right? Like traditional art structure. If you look at like, if we think about like, what are the great artists? I remember having this conversation with my teenager. Well, he was a little kid at the time. Now I think he might feel differently, but he was like, I want to go to Italy because that's where all the great art masters are. And I said to him, well, why do you think that all the great masters are in Italy? And if you really, really like dig down, like peel back the layers, it's because we were told that you have to be white, male, and from Europe, right? And there's all this new art being like, people are finding all these artists. Like I've read this article about France and how there's all these like artists of the global majority, right? Who were creating like incredible work, but they never got any sort of recognition. Or like just even looking at women, right? So many women have been left out of the conversation, like intentionally. And so these are like inherently built into the artist space. And so when someone young and new, right? Like I'm not young, but I'm new to the art world relatively. You feel like, oh, those grants aren't for me, or I have to have all these solo exhibitions and like an established gallery and all of this stuff. And it's simply not true. There is a movement, at least in like a small circle, and especially the funding that's provided by city and states that really want to like broaden and like welcome in more people. And so I think sometimes you just need someone to be like, hey, you should apply to this, you know? And one of the things that I love about doing the grant support for others is like people who have won past grants that look like the people I'm serving, like the people of the global majority, right?
Yeah.
And just that simple act of being like, hey, I haven't had a solo show, but I just won $25,000 in this award, which did happen, by the way. Just from encouraging, be like, you should apply to this, you should apply to this. And now some other artists that I know who don't have like that background, that established, like, you know, the elitist art background, are now applying for these grants. And, you know, I think sometimes you just need somebody who looks like you, who has your kind of background to say, hey, you should apply to this. Like, just try, right? And also, like, not just that, but we're afraid of failure. We're afraid of being rejected. You know, all of us have like, I feel like it's like pretty universal. We all have like, especially being like a person of the global majority, like you
Yeah.
literally have lived life feeling like you didn't belong, you're rejected, you're not, you know, we haven't seen ourselves centered, right? In anything, in
Yeah.
like media and anything. And so, you know, sometimes it just takes like somebody kind of giving you that encouragement and like telling you like, hey, you know, we deserve this too. Like just this idea that like we should get this money. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. That's how I feel.
Yeah. No, it's
I'm overconfident, unfortunately.
but that's the thing. Well, so here's my thing, and this is what I learned. Sometimes we feel guilty or like we're overconfident in what we do. We're actually probably the level of confidence we need because we have the world telling us that we can't. So I feel like any confidence we have, we might. But the other part of that is that you know, when I got my grant, my opportunity to do Seattle Restored, I already felt like I was a faker, like I didn't deserve to be there. But then I looked around at the alumni and the people participating. I'm like, oh, there's so many people of color, global majority here. I was like, okay, like we should be in here, like we're in this together. And then my first art exhibition that I was putting together here, I had someone make the comment of, you only got this um, because you're a minority, well, specifically because you're black, and that I felt like took the wind out of my sails. Like, and so I think that's the other thing too. And I kind of tell people to like, you have to bulletproof your mind because it's one thing to get the grant and talk yourself up that you belong and you deserve to get the grant, but then it's another thing to see the people's responses when you do get it, because that's when you'll have people who will come out and remind you, oh, you're not welcome.
Yeah,
That's insane.
I'm so sorry that happened to you, but you know, I think if someone had said that to me, I would be like, yeah, and I deserve it because for years and years and years, people who look like me never got these opportunities, and now it's our turn. That's how I feel
Yeah.
about it, right? And like, you know, I think we need each other to like reinforce each other. No, no, no. Like we have value and we what we create has value and should be seen and is important. And I think that we really need to ground ourselves and each other by supporting each other and like reminding ourselves, I'm sorry you got that feedback. It's bullshit, by the way.
You know what? I felt bad for probably like the first month. Then I sat down and talked to my cousin, and then I was like, you know what? I'm gonna use this fuel just like fuel me, and it carried me. Like we're in December, and it's still fueling my motivation.
That's wonderful. Yeah, but it was great because you had somebody
Yeah,
to reflect with, to talk to be like, "Oh no, like this is bullshit." Like who knows exactly what you're going through. I think that's why it's important that we like gather together as community, as a collective to kind of reinforce, kind of like push back against all the stereotypes and like, it's I mean, that's like plain old racist, right? Like this idea that, oh,
yeah.
you're black, so therefore you're underqualified. I mean, that's like the classic trope. Like, come
Yeah.
on, if you're gonna be racist, like be creative.
So that's my other thing too. Like this is not me supporting it, but I'm like, be creative. Like it's 2025. We've just about heard it all. But not that I'm inviting that. I don't want to invite that. But yeah. But I wanted to ask in terms of we belong. You've also I know that you've also written grants, and so I wanted to ask what advice do you have for people who are looking to write grants, either by themselves as an individual, they're new to writing grants, or they might have written a grant before by themselves, but now they're looking to do a little bit better.
A lot of things. I think one of the things that I do personally is I looked for specific types of grants. And what I mean by that is there's like this big movement in like the nonprofit giving space called trust-based philanthropy. And there's this idea, like if you look at traditional like nonprofit, the power dynamic is really off. It's like a lot of rich people who have a lot of money and they want to like prop themselves up. So they give money and to be like good people and like to feel good about themselves. And inherently there's this like uneven dynamic. And then, it's like this idea of it's like paternalism. It's like this idea that like, well, the people with money know better than the people living the experience, right?
Mhm.
And so trust-based philanthropy is this movement that's happening. And if you know the Metropole, it's like a building run by the Statterberg Foundation down in Pioneer Square. You should check it
I
out.
need to check it out. Yeah.
Yeah, they started opening them. They're starting to open it up like to the public. Like for Pioneer Square Art Walk, they had a Native American market that my friend was part of, and that's how I found out about it. But they're like a great example of trust-based philanthropy. And this idea is that the people who are closest to the problem know how to solve it.
Hmm.
So that when big companies like fund or big agencies fund those organizations, you fund it with the idea that like you trust the people you're giving the money to. And so that means like low threshold, like no low barrier to entry, no crazy reporting requirements, right? Because like a lot of the nonprofits, like they'll give you money with your nonprofit and they'll say, hey, we need like a 30-page report, right? Everybody's like doing the work for free and, barely making enough money. So aligned with that mentality, that mindset, there's like a lot of grant funding, especially like provided by the city or state or governments, or kind of like, well, maybe not the US federal government, but you know what I mean,
Yeah.
are kind of moving towards that philosophy. For culture is a really great example, right? Like they like to get an art opportunity, you don't have to give a resume, right? Because right away you're cutting out a
Yeah.
bunch of people. Instead, they just have questions that they ask to like describe what your project is, describe the impact you're making. And for culture, I've gotten two for culture grants. The Body Project is one that I haven't really started yet, but I got a heritage grant for the Name Story Project show last year. And the reporting requirements were like really simple. I didn't have to keep receipts and accounting of every single thing, every spent hour, how I spent it, who I spent it on. It was very like, hey, prove to us that like you put our logo on things, right?
Yeah.
And luckily my project, the person at Fur Culture who was overseeing my project was like, yeah, I saw your posters all over the city. You did a really good job. And so like look for those kind of opportunities, and you know that they're more like trust based on like they'll have like an equity statement, which means like you are going to have a better chance. Like it's going to rely less on like your background and all that stuff. Like look for that. Look for things with like relatively easy applications, meaning it's not like give us your your tax form for the past like five,
Yeah.
whatever. I'm just using that as an example. Obviously, like individual grants won't ask for that, but yeah, just like there's like 6 signs, and so those are the grants you're going to have a better opportunity to get. And, it's going to be a more equitable process. And also like take advantage, like a lot of these, like Arts Fund, for example, which is funded by Paul Allen. I know that's not individual level, it's an organizational grant, but for example, like in For Culture and everybody, they'll like have information sessions, program managers that you can like email, and they're really great about getting back, and you can do one-on-ones, like use the support, and like don't wait till last minute, because a lot of these places will allow you to send in a draft so that you get feedback directly about like, oh, you need to talk about this or you're missing that, or like just don't procrastinate. Like give yourself time, take advantage of every single offering that a granting organization is giving you, like information sessions, one-on-one time, like do office hours, do feedback, send in a draft, do it ahead of time. And that like greatly increases your chances of getting a grant. And then also reach out to me, right? Like,
Yeah.
I really want to I mean, I do it at capacity right now, supporting artists with writing grants, like doing like the info sessions with past artists who have won grants and stuff. So I like didn't have as much capacity to do it, but I'm hoping to do more next year where we have gatherings like that. And just find a partner and like don't be afraid of rejection. Make a list. Like the more you hit, the more opportunities, like the better your chances. It's like the lotto, right? Give more tickets you
Yeah.
buy, the better your odds. So, and don't be afraid. Like one of the biggest things that I noticed is a lot of artists who don't have experience are like almost afraid to have like a point of view, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
have a really clear point of view and like go in with this attitude of like, why does this project matter? Why does your art matter? Why is it important? Right? Not about you. It's like, well, when I look at my work, it's like, oh, it's so I can get all this accolades and like, no, it's not. It's about like what I'm trying to address with the project. We're artists for a reason. We're trying
Yeah.
to see what we don't see, right? Unearth what is buried in society. That's literally what we do as artists. And so like go in with that, because that passion that you have and like the belief in your project it translates to the way that you write the grant. So have a very strong point of view. Like don't try to fit into everything. Like know why, your why. I think that's the biggest thing. And even for like submission to like art opportunities, like I'm on a jury right now. I won't mention which one, but like a lot of artists are like really I mean, their work's beautiful, right? But they have like no point of view, and I don't know why this art exists. And so that
Ooh, yeah.
matters. Like that matters. Like and I know, like, especially if you're a person of the global majority, your art exists for a very specific reason. Don't be afraid to embrace that.
Yeah. And that's something I think I struggle with is, I have paintings that I create. Some are very beautiful, but then the ones that I do create that I'm like, oh, this is the purpose, this is the voice. All of a sudden, that voice in the back of my head that takes the purpose away kind of creeps in, and I'm realizing, that for people who are part of the global majority, that's when that message of we belong really kicks in. Because oftentimes we mute ourselves because we don't think we belong, and the project we're working on doesn't really matter because we're still fighting with that belonging. Yeah.
Hmm.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah.
say, I was talking to a friend of mine who's
Mhm.
trans, and he was saying like, "Well, my work isn't like obviously trans," you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the nature of the work exists because of his lived experience, right? And
Yeah.
so just like learning how to like make those connections and like being able to communicate that is really important. I think learning how to
Mhm.
just even talk about your art is really important. That's not something we
Yeah.
practice, right? Because we're not usually like on interviews saying like, oh, my artwork is about this and this is the impact that I hope to make. And that's literally what you're doing with grants. You're like making
Yeah.
a case for why your art exists and why it's important. And so like, I don't know, find a accountability partner and like practice giving your elevator pitch, or like go to like an art show that you're participating in, and don't be afraid to talk to people. Ask them what their piece is about. People love talking about their art. So like, you never be shy to be like, hey, if you're the artist, like tell me a little bit about your art. Like people love talking.
Yeah.
So
It's funny you say that because I started going to different senior homes and giving talks about my art, and I stunk the first time. I was surprised they invited me back, and that was the first time I actually had to talk about myself and what I was doing. And it wasn't until I really thought about it and like looked up bullet points that I was like, oh, there's a lot to say. And so like my advice to people who are trying to talk about their art and find their purpose is, look online and look at other people's. I start looking at other people's bios and how they talked about their art, or listening to art podcasts and listening to how they critiqued. I hate to say this, how they critique the masters, which I have an issue with them calling them the masters, but I looked at that and then looked at mine and then did the same thing. And I think once I started doing that, I also started finding value and along with things to say, because I started looking at it the lens that I feel like society has elevated the artists that they've chosen historically.
absolutely. And I think too, like a lot of artists are like they're like kind of afraid of like not not sounding like an artist, if that makes sense. And I think
Yeah,
a lot of times they're like, well, but I don't have like the jargon and stuff. And it's like, nobody wants to hear that language. Like, just talk straight up. Just talk about how you feel and your why, because it's just a little like digging, like journal about it, right? Like, why does this feel important? And sometimes you don't even know. Like, we create art and then afterwards we're like, that's what that was for. And you don't even recognize that. And that's okay. But just like you have to learn, if you want to get grants, you have to learn how to talk about it. Don't worry about the flowery language. Just use straight up language. Good trust-based philanthropy style grants don't judge you on how like artistic your language is. Personally, like I read that stuff. I mean, I have a master's degree and I'm like, like, what are you trying to say? Just
yeah,
be like, don't be afraid to just sound like a normal person. Or I shouldn't say normal. I don't like that word normal, but like your average person.
yeah. I've told other artists, I was like, they're just looking for you to be you. Like, there's a lot of I tell them there's a lot of people out there who are going to use the chat GPTs. They're going to use the people like to write and all this other stuff that's going to take them out of it. And if you don't bring your full self, then you're not going to really stand out from the other applicants. You got to, oh no, this goes back to the belonging. This really goes back to the belonging. You
Everything
have to
does.
bring your full self. You have to know that you belong, because that's what's going to set you apart. That's your superpower.
Yeah, no, it's true. Like the more personal your art is, the more it resonates with more people, which sounds really odd, but it really is true. Like the more personal and open you are. And I mean, that's what art is. I mean, personally, for me, and you can disagree, not everybody has to think this way, but like to me, the art that engages me are the art where someone is like fully open and they're like very vulnerable. And that's where truth lies, right? It's like
Yeah,
in like the openness and vulnerability. And that kind of art is to me way more interesting than something like that's just like, not that beauty shouldn't exist for the sake of beauty, but that's like a whole nother conversation, right? Like
yeah,
even this idea of like labeling something beautiful is a whole different conversation. But like, to me, like having that meaning, because we're meaning making machines, whether or not the
yeah,
meaning is real or not, like that's what humans do. We make meaning out of everything. We're always looking for meaning, always trying to figure out the why. And so like that's what makes people interesting. And so if someone's not vulnerable with their work, it's like, like, oh, that's nice, but I want to be touched.
yeah. Exactly. So I want to ask. This is the question I like to ask everyone I interview. Who or how would you describe yourself as an artist right now in this very moment?
That is, I hate big questions like
Right.
that. That's so meta. It's like, so give me an example of what that means.
Okay, so this is probably not a good example, but this is my answer for right now. As an artist right now in this very moment, I would describe myself as messy, because I am currently packing up, and so it is a mess in the gallery. But I would also say I'm an artist that's very joy filled and future forward, futuristic. I don't know. I think that's where I'm at as an artist right now in this moment.
Yeah, thank you for that example. That helped me kind of think through how I feel. I think messy is just human being human. So I'm like, I'm
It is.
always messy. So I would say human. I would use the word human, imperfect. I don't know. I just want my art to help me feel connection and feel alive. That's how I think I want to use my art. I feel like my art, the intention of it is to connect and to like peel back the layers. And to me, that's what makes me feel alive. Like that's like my high. Like having this like connecting, vulnerable conversation with someone. Like literally I get like it's like coffee shots, right? Like getting energized. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of like the talk around way of explaining like where I'm at.
Yeah.
I
No.
I guess like in general.
Yeah. No, it absolutely does. That's something that I really enjoy too. Is just like those conversations around art that jump into the vulnerability, that jump into the humanness of it. I am not a poet, but I got to see a poet. I got to give a poet an opportunity to like do a spoken word, and I saw someone like start crying in response to the poetry. I'm not a crier, and I'm not. I want to be also clear. I didn't judge the person. I was just like, wow, they're like really moved. Like this is. I've never seen this happen before. I've never seen someone like move to tears. And then this person started sharing their life story with the artist, and I was like, oh, there's this deeper thing going on. And to witness it was just like, that's a coffee shot. Like that is adrenaline rush.
Yeah, I mean, art allows us to connect to the parts of us that we didn't even know existed. And
Yeah.
revealed to us like the stories that have happened to us, but we were not even cognizant of it. I've definitely had that experience where I heard a spoken word poet and brought me to tears. Or I've heard like somebody, one of my neighbors plays for the Seattle Symphony, and she's like, "Oh," I'm like, can you listen to this? Be like, she plays viola, and she like, I'm like practicing and I'm really nervous. Like, can I play for you? And like, I mean, just like I was so moved, like it's connecting, and I don't even know what it is. Like, what are you making me feel? I don't know, but it's making me cry. It's like this revelation and release. So yeah, it's. I mean, that's why we do art. We do it to connect.
Absolutely. And honestly, when it comes to, well, no, I was crying for music for a different reason. My parents were forcing me to take an instrument, and I was crying because I was a painter, not a trombone player. But like I did get a chance to sit in their Seattle Symphony's orchestra or their auditorium, and that was emotional. That was amazing. Just like the sound, the things that are vibrating, and how you feel. And it really kind of goes back to like the healing aspect of art too.
Yeah, and I think that let's go back to belonging.
Yes, yes, yes.
I think when we feel that way, I think we feel belonging the most
Hmm.
because we feel not just belonging to ourselves because it's revealing to us something about ourselves, but like listening to music like in an and like with other people, like in that kind of setting, listening to spoken poetry in a that's like there's an energy about it, right? And there's like you like create a sense of belonging because you're all experiencing and being moved at the same time. And that's like, I mean, I don't know if you've ever been to like a concert where everybody's just like, you're all giant. You bought a ticket because you're a big super fan, right? And
Yeah.
like the energy that
Hmm.
like it's palpable. Like you can literally feel it. But that feeling of belonging, I think we're chasing that our entire lives. Like that feeling of like being part of something bigger than ourselves. And I
Yeah.
think that's what belonging gives to us. It's like, and that's what art gives to us. It's like, well, this is not just me. Like I spent like most of my adult life being like super guarded. Like you could not ask me any personal questions. I like everything was like very superficial with me. I think I was pretty vanilla now that I look
Yeah.
back. I like myself a lot better now. Like, but photography actually was one of the ways that I learned to open up because it helped me like learn more about myself. And that's how I ended up doing like the portrait work. But like, yeah, it's like that openness. It just makes such a difference. And I didn't realize that that's what I needed to do to feel that belonging that I've been chasing my whole life. Growing up in America and like being an immigrant and having like, and it's like things are different now, right? And I want to answer one of your questions you sent me. Is that okay?
Yeah,
You asked
absolutely,
me like,
absolutely.
you asked the question, one of the like the pre-questions that you sent me was like, what's like a song that
Oh yes.
defines your journey? And I was like, I was gonna email you, but I'm like, I don't have a song. Don't ask me this question. And I thought about it, right? And there's two songs. The first song is Quiet by Milk. I don't know if you've heard of it. Connie Lim is an Asian American songwriter. And it was the song, it went viral at the Women's March, the very first Women's March when Trump was first elected. I flew to
Okay.
DC, so I was there, but obviously, like, there were like hundreds of thousands. So unfortunately, I wasn't here, but she did like this a cappella with like this group of women of I Won't Be Quiet. And that song, like, bam, like the second I heard that song, I just started like bawling, like tears and tears and tears. And that's like part of my journey. Is like I've always been quiet. Like I've always like, I had a lot of trauma in my family with my voice growing up. And I won't get into details,
Yeah.
like we don't have the time. But I've shared the story before in public, and like that was one thing. And the second one, and don't laugh at me,
I'm
is
not.
K-pop Demon Hunters. Okay, so
Okay,
that's
wait, which one?
okay.
Which one?
Golden. And I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
So I wasn't gonna watch K-pop Demon Hunters, right? I mean, I heard all this like hoopla, so I was like, oh, I wonder what it's all about. But my 13-year-old son, not girl, my 13-year-old son was like, Mom, you have to watch this. Like he kept telling me, like, you have to watch this, you have to watch this. And finally I started watching it. And I swear to God, like from the beginning scene when they're like eating all the Korean snacks, I was like, oh my God, like this is like it's healing all sorts of childhood wounds. And then, like the whole movie, I was like enthralled. I was like, oh my God. And I visited Korea many times. And so, like, some of the scenes, I was like, I know where that is. I've been there. And like, just like seeing myself, like, on like the biggest hit movie in the world. I mean, is it in the world?
It's
Probably,
okay.
right?
K-pop Demon Hunters so much. It's huge because they're also just they're everywhere in American pop culture, and I love
Mhm.
it because the lead. Sorry, this is happens to be the thing that I nerd out about. The lead singer, I forgot her name, but she was
DJ.
told that she couldn't be a performer because her voice was too low, and then here she is in like the hit thing, and then now they're a whole band, and so it's kind of like come full circle. Sorry, yes,
Yeah. So you're a fan too, but yeah, but that, yeah. And like not just that, but for me, I was having this conversation with my friend who's Native American, and we were talking about K-pop Demon Hunters, and it didn't hit her the same way because she didn't have like that same experience of like growing up in Korean culture, which I felt was like so restrictive because it's very controlling. Like the whole scene with the mother figure where she's like, you have to hide who you are, and like that's literally like Korean culture, right? So seeing like this messaging that pushes up against that, and then like when that song Golden came out, every time I hear it, whenever they see them perform like clips on like reels and stuff, I like bawl every single time. And like the whole messaging of that, of like, you know, hiding, and like this idea of the honeymoon, and like it being like a societal thing, not just like it's like our individual journey, but we're like just a little part in like a greater whole. It's just that song to me, like the hiding and like accepting who I am, and like accepting that I'm imperfect, and you know, all the messaging, that song is my journey. And a lot of other Asian American women, especially Korean people who are Korean heritage, all like, I've seen so many videos of Korean women crying listening to this song. It's like healing something in me. It really is. Like that's like a power of art. It's like that song or the story, just like I can't get enough of the song.
Yeah, I love it because I feel like, and this isn't to like talk down on like the stuff we see coming out of Hollywood and things like that, but sometimes you have that movie that really pierces and drives home a really huge message that like hits with everyone. And I feel like it feels a little few and far between nowadays. And so when it does happen, there's something special. I just want to savor that and just enjoy that
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah, and
But
I love the message, like, we're all part of something bigger than ourselves, right? And that's also, like, what We Belong is about, is, like, this idea that, like, we are part of something bigger than ourselves. Like, get your head out of your ass and, like, look around you, you know? You're not the only one. We're all There's so many people experiencing what we experienced. And no, before I was open and I was very closed, I always thought, like, there was something wrong with me because of the way I felt or the way I thought, and, like, I'm like, "Oh, you mean these are, like, universal human experiences?" Like,
yeah,
once I figured out, like, everybody feels the exact same way, everybody has imposter syndrome, everybody struggles with, like, self-worth and all this stuff, you're like, "Oh, that's just me being human." Like, it didn't seem like it, like, lost its power over me once I realized that, and I think that that's what I wanna do, like, with whatever work that I'm putting out in the world, is, like, letting people know, "Hey, you're not alone. Like, we're in this together. We matter, and we have value, and we have a right to exist and be seen, and our stories matter, and we deserve to be centered." So yeah.
and that's powerful to hear right now because I feel like in a lot of ways as a culture, as a society, we're really lacking on empathy and the ability to like see ourselves connected to each other. And art, again, it breaks down that barrier. It's really hard to not have empathy for someone who you've connected with emotionally and who's so close to you in culture. And when I say in culture, I mean in community. Like you're enmeshed together.
Yeah, and I think that that's that messaging of like the empathy, focusing on the empathy in people's personal stories. Like when I had my name story show, I had cisgender white men tell me that a certain story made them cry because they had nothing. I mean, they had nothing in common with the story, but they did have what they know, what the feeling of like not belonging, or feeling like they didn't fit in, or feeling like, you know, they felt rejected or were afraid of like, you know, not making friends, and like those are like universal experiences, right? Like the details are all different. We all have like our own specific stories, but all of our stories like are pretty universal if you
Yeah.
get down to like the heart of like how they made us feel, because feelings are just human, right? And we all experience the exact same feelings.
And I kind of wanted to bring it all together because something I noticed, I'm not even sure if we touched on it, but the through line that I noticed was that getting to that journey of belonging, getting to that place where you feel like you belong, it really took you being able to kind of crack open that shell and really explore your story and the things that made you uncomfortable in the human experience. And that's what landed you in like, hey, I belong here.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Like, you know, when I started doing portrait work, I kind of discovered it like by accident. It wasn't something that I ever thought about doing. And I saw this photographer speak about it, and I saw her portraits, and I was like, oh my God. Like, so I was like blown away. And I was like, oh, hey, friends. Like, you know, my mom friends at the time, my kids were
Yeah.
really little. I was like, hey, can you come like pose for me? I just want to know if I know how to do it. Right. Cause I was just doing like family portraits outdoors and stuff. And like when I did these portrait work with these women, like, when I would show it to them, they would start crying and like talk about like, oh, I see parts of myself that I haven't seen in years, or parts of my, like, I forgot what my smile looked like. And, this was me before I had kids and got married, like the person that I used to be. And like, it had this like really powerful impact. And so I was like very, very focused on like, I want to show women their light, like their beauty through their light, right? But like, it just took me on this journey of like, if I want, like, there's something really powerful here that I'm doing with these portraits. Like, just imagine how much more powerful that would be if like you looked at the dark parts too, right? Like, because some of the women would see like the more serious photos and they'd be like, oh, I don't like this. And I'm like, why? Because it reminds them of like something painful, or reminds them of like their dad who they don't have a good relationship with or whatever. And there's like power in that, right? And so it really forced me to think about myself, and like, if I'm gonna ask somebody else to sit in front of my lens and like literally like open their heart, like rip open their hearts, right? Well, gently. It wasn't like a ripping, but like a
Yeah.
gentle, like opening of the heart, right? Like, how can I do that if I haven't done that myself, right? And so, and I think it goes back to the quote that you were saying, like that's what Sonia Renee Taylor teaches us. Like, we have to learn to radically love our bodies, and that's
Hmm.
something I'm struggling with because I'm going through perimenopause, right? It's something that every single woman goes through. It can start anywhere from age 35 to whatever, right? And my body's been changing a lot, and so I'm trying to like reconcile, which is probably why, like, even though I started this project up 2 years ago, I'm finally doing it now because I probably need to look at myself. It's like really, and I think that all the art that we create is about healing. Like, at the end of the day, we're trying to heal ourselves, but in healing ourselves, we're also providing a platform for other people to be able to heal themselves. And I think that's what that Sonia Renee Taylor quote was really about like, we have to learn to radically love ourselves. And because then if you radically love yourself, how can you not radically love somebody else? Like, you can't. That's hypocrisy.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I don't want to take it too far away, but in terms of like belonging and platforms, you did mention that you went to the Women's March, and I wanted to hear, if you're okay with sharing, I wanted to hear a little bit more about that experience and how that kind of worked into the belonging.
Well, that was like before I even figured out I wanted to. I don't even know what the heck what was happening. I feel like it was so long ago, but I was just so pissed off at that election. I think what happens is when something like that happens, okay, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I want to say something about being pissed off. Women are not allowed to be pissed off. Right. And especially women of the global majority, we are not allowed to have feelings. We're not allowed to be angry in general. I was so, and I think the real reason why we're not allowed to be angry is because we have a lot of power. We have a lot more power. I think men, sorry to tell you, Kyle, but I think we have incredible power. And
Yeah.
like, when you harness that anger, it turns into something really big. And I was just so angry. I just felt like I had to do something. And so, yeah, so I ended up, luckily I have a friend who lives in Virginia, and then her brother and sister-in-law were like lived in DC. So they were super great about us, like, staying at their place. Like, it was me and like two other people. They were hosting like this whole group of people who wanted to march. They were so wonderful. And yeah, just going out there and just being part of something bigger than me. I'm still unpacking it though, because it was organized. I mean, it was a multicultural, multiracial organizing body, but I would say the majority were white women. And so I don't know, it was weird because there were all these guardsmen with like machine guns and stuff. Like, if you got off I don't know what they call it. They're just like the subway. I call it subway because I'm from New York City, but
Yeah.
when you got off the subway, there were all these men holding, but all the women were like, "Oh, thank you for keeping us safe." It was, I don't know. It was like, I'm
Yeah. There's a
unpacking.
different relationship.
There's a racial component to it, right? Because like white women are protected, but that's like a whole nother podcast, right? Like,
Yeah.
I work in the day. My day job is I work in DEI. I don't teach any of the courses. I just do the project management for my company, but we call it DEIB. So we add belonging. Like, we don't, DEI is not complete without the idea of belonging. And that's why like our organization really centers humanity. But yeah, one of our co-founders is a white queer woman, and she's always like, she teaches a class called What's Up with White Women. Just to unpack
I
like
want to take
how
that class.
gender and race like interplay, and like this idea of like this internalized sexism that a lot of women, we all have internalized everything. Like, there's nothing wrong. You're not a bad person for having internalized racism and internalized sexism. That's just you. When you grow up with that, that's all you know, right? Until you
Yeah.
unpack it. And so I think that there's like a weird dynamic. I feel like I'm going kind of off script here,
Well,
but
this
yeah,
all
but
it still ties into the belonging of it all
mhm,
because it's still it's the work, it's the understanding. Like, yes, I'm going to the Women's March. I am a woman, but also their lived experience is still different than mine. But yet, I still belong here. We need to do some work with who's in the room, And yeah, sorry, I don't want to narrate, but it still goes back to that belonging of it all. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I appreciate you narrating.
No, sorry. It's only because there's some things that I've run into recently where I'm like, you know, by day I work in HR, and so there's that DIS aspect of it and the belonging and realizing there's some things that we agree on and lived experience are the same, but being queer is not something that they have in common, and might not necessarily understand, or within the queer aspect they might not necessarily have being black, and so I'm understanding like there's that intersectionality of it and the belonging in those levels.
Yeah, I think what's missing, especially in American culture, is this idea that like how I experience reality is not how you experience reality. Like I run into this all the time where someone will be like, "Well, I don't think that." And I'm like, "Well, you have a very like contained little world that you live in and I don't live in that world, so of course you don't see that." But I think that like recognizing like, "Oh, we don't know everything and like how we experience the world is not how other people experience the world." I think going in with that mindset is like so important. Like, and that's what I love about art is like it gives you a window into somebody's world and how they see and experience things. Cause you can have like three people witness the exact same thing and you have three different stories. Cause
Yeah.
we're like constantly grounding it in our own like interpretation of the world. And we get our interpretation of the world based on the experiences that we've had. And so I think like art is so important because we get to kind of peek into someone else's interpretation that might be very different from your own. And I think it's really important, especially if you're like running spaces or if you're like serving communities that are not centered, to like always hold that and recognize like if someone's like speaking like this is my experience, you don't go, oh, but I haven't never seen that. I get that all the time from like white people, right? And I'm like, like I was having this conversation with my neighbor who's like this white guy, and we were talking about, I won't mention the store, but we were talking about going to a camera store. And I was like, I don't know. I don't like going there. And he's like, oh, what do you mean? Like, they're super helpful. And I'm like, oh, well, all those old white men, they kind of like don't, they kind of look at me and they're like, oh, you're not a real photographer. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Mhm.
Like it's just like if you're the norm or like you're centered, it's like you think everybody experiences that, but you don't, right? And I have to recognize too, like my role, like especially like if I look at like a Black community versus like the Asian community, like there's like a lot of racial dynamics happening there, and like how Asians are used to pit Black people and like blame people for like their failures. Like look at
Yeah.
the model my there's
Yeah.
so much to learn. I mean, I think that's wonderful though. I love like not knowing because then there's like so much room to grow and know and understand. And I think the more opportunities, like through art that we get to learn about that and how that feels, I think the better.
Yeah, and just to kind of bring it back to like the we belong of it all, something that even looking within like Black and Asian dynamics, just the communities that I've grown up in, they're so intertwined that a lot like what happens to one is kind of what's going to happen to the other because there's that interdependency. And when we look at our communities, especially in art and needing to belong, going back to what you said about the grants, um, in terms of like trust grants, they need to trust us, and we need to be there with our stories, writing these grants so that you know, because of our vantage points, because of our differences and our ability to like put the story together and what we need, we really can fuel and create that change in the world. Oh, attaching it back to the quote that we're really looking to see,
Yeah.
and that really comes from, as you mentioned to me earlier, like having a team, taking time for one another and being able to like also understand each other's journeys and their stories and where they're coming from.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned interdependence because I think that that's not a value. Or that's not. I wouldn't even call it a value. It's just a truth. I think that a lot of people in American culture, because we're so individualistic and individual focused, that we like don't recognize that like we are interdependent, and like what happens to one person affects the other, whether or not you intended to or not, right? And so like I don't know. Why wouldn't you want more diversity? Like, why wouldn't you want things to be less like vanilla? Like, why wouldn't you want why would you just want one flavor? Like, why wouldn't you want more and more flavors? And like, I don't know. It just makes, I mean, I think food's like a perfect example, right? I mean, like somebody growing up Korean, like my parents had their own business and they couldn't eat their food inside the store. They had to eat outside.
Oh.
So they, like on the East Coast, it's freezing in the middle of winter, rain doesn't matter. They couldn't because it was too stinky, right? And so like just this
Mhm.
like simple like think about that. Think about that. Like this is a business that they owned and they couldn't even eat their own food. And like that's evolving, right? People are like seeking Korean food now, which is like it's like mind blowing to me. But it's just like that. It's like why wouldn't you want that diversity of perspective? It just makes life so much like more interesting. And like my husband's white, and I'm like unpacking that. I'm like, oh, like what was not my conscious reason, but like what was like the subconscious? What's like the history there? What's like because there's a relationship right between Asian women and white men, and like
Mhm.
unpacking that. And it's when I first met him, I would be like, "Are you sure you want to be with somebody like me? Like your baby's not going to have blonde hair, blue eyes, right?" Like that's the kind of stuff I would say. And today I look at him, I'm like, "You're so like vanilla. You're so lucky you met me. Like, look, you eat garlic like straight up or raw, right? Your life is so much
Yeah.
richer and better because you're like so much more well-rounded and try new things and like you're like open to all these different cultures and experiences." And I'm like, your life is so much more like fun and brighter and interesting. And I'm like, your life was so boring before you met me. That's
Yeah.
what I tell him. And I think I think when we're raised in a country that automatically like we're constantly getting messages that we don't belong. I think it's important for us to remember like no, we make the world better. Like
Mhm.
we exist, our existence makes the world better. And I know it's hard to feel that, especially when people literally are worried about bodily harm and
Yeah.
being I mean I won't get into it, but I mean there are people whose lives are in danger because of who they are, and it's like horrifying. It's horrifying. So I think we got to double down.
Yes.
We're artists. We got to double down and like get in people's faces. And I mean not in like a mean way, but in like a
Yeah.
like an authentic the things that's like true, right? But like
Yeah.
we need our work to be out there even more. So if you're like a person of the global majority and you like damn go after the grants and the opportunities, like put your work out there. Like if it doesn't matter if you're rejected, doesn't mean your work is invaluable. It means that somebody just has a different perspective of like what they think should be seen, right? And so
Yeah.
it's like you got to find places like the gallery you are kind of slowly shutting down, but like I mean we need more. Obviously we need more
Yeah.
spaces that center.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time today and, bring us into We Belong, but also helping us wrap our heads around the fact that, yes, we belong. And I look forward to just seeing more. I want to see the project. I want to see the project as it develops over 2026 and then unveils in 2027. In the show notes, I will have a link to your Instagram where everyone can see your last project with names. But also, please follow We Belong Seattle because if you want to find gallery openings, events going on, grants, Judy, We Belong Seattle is like the place to go. Awesome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.